So just before we start, thank you again for joining us. And I will briefly introduce the purpose of this interview as well as the topic, and then we can go on.
Okay.
Today's interview is directly linked with the World Peace Freedom Day,
Okay.
and is part of a series of interviews that we do in our organization monthly, and it's called Monthly Dialogue Interviews. And we usually do it with all the team. For example, today you are going to have the pleasure to discuss with my colleague Shema, who's a project manager, my colleague Eva, who's a social media expert, our executive director Mehmet, and myself, I'm also a project manager. The today topic is really linked with the actual situation, and therefore we would like to discuss with you the right middle between freedom of expression and self-compliance through the lens of the actual crisis linked to the COVID-19. So now I will give the floor to my colleague Shema so we can start.
Very good.
Hello, Mr. Sagaga.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, it's Shema, yes.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Shema.
Nice, it's a pleasure to meet you here. Thank you very much for accepting our interview. So I'm going to start with a very brief question, easiest one.
Okay.
As we know, you're the head of department of the Human Rights and Safety Department of Federation of International Journalists. And no question, we are not questioning your expertise on human rights and fundamental rights and safety case. And also you're very, very well journalist. So today, as you know, it is the Press Freedom Day. So we would like to know about what's the meaning of the Press Freedom Day for you as a journalist and as a head of Department of the Safety.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one to start. Well, thank you very much for having me and for giving me the opportunity to talk about this particular important day for journalism in general. Let me start by saying that this day was actually initiated back in 1991 in Windhoek. It came from the Windhoek Declaration. Windhoek is in Namibia, of course. And the idea was for journalists to try to mobilize the international community on the need for there to be press freedom, because we do need press freedom in our everyday life, just not about journalism, by the way. And then I would like to link that the importance of the day to the role I hold in the IFJ, because our federation is an organization, an international organization, which promotes human rights, which promotes democracy, and of course, which also try to anchor the role of journalism in a public and an inclusive debate. So when we talk about press freedom and what Press Freedom Day, we actually mean the need for journalism to be totally independent, so that it can give the voice not only to those who are powerful, but also to those who are not powerful. In that way, to be inclusive and to be able to highlight the needs and concerns of everybody. And we can only do that if we are free to work independently from any influence, from any pressure. So for us, it's a very important day for journalists as well, as professionals, but also for the ordinary people, the ordinary men and women who needs to be informed, and to be informed in an independent manner and in an objective manner.
Thank you. So it's not only just a celebration day, but also just to remind everybody that we have to be free, and journalists has to be free in any place of the world.
That's right.
Thank you. Now I'm just skipping stage to my colleague Eva, and she's going to continue.
Very good.
Good morning, Mr. Sagaga.
Good morning, Eva.
Hi.
Please call me Ernest, okay?
I'm sorry?
Please call me Ernest. We can get rid of Mr.
All right, I'll do that again. Good morning, Ernest. It's such a pleasure to speak to you today. We've seen you obviously at the press club a couple of weeks ago, and you were such a wonderful speaker and so clear and structured, and we just thought that you would be perfect to do an interview with. in the light of this event today. What I would like to, a topic that I would like to address and that cannot be ignored is the global impact of the COVID-19 outbreak.
Yes.
Preventing journalists from practicing their profession is not something new, but in this time of COVID-19, in which adequate and reliable information is especially important, it's quite, I would say, risky, but also dangerous that journalists cannot do their work properly.
Yes.
As it puts at risk the lives of millions of people around the world, as well as it's more difficult to find an adequate way to deal with this pandemic. Unfortunately, as pointed out by the recently published World Press Freedom Index, the coronavirus pandemic has even made the situation for journalists much worse. And we have also seen that countries such as China and Iran, but even EU member states, jeopardize press freedom within their countries. And in this light, I'm very curious, and I really want to ask you, where does the line, where is the line, and what's the limit between press freedom and the governmental responsibility to prevent the spread of fake news?
Okay, it's a very good question, and actually very timely, because just yesterday, we launched a report, the 2020 report of the Council of Europe on the platform for the promotion of journalism and the safety of journalists. And I would encourage you to read the press release which we put out yesterday, because it includes incidents, even in Europe, as you said, even Europe, where there are attempts to curtail the freedom of journalists, particularly in this period of COVID-19. Now, some leaders in Europe have compared to the ongoing situation to a situation of war. And if you probably have heard the saying that in war, the first casualty is the truth. What governments are trying to do, some governments, not all, but some governments, when they try to limit freedom for journalists to actually report independently, report in transparency, the situation as it is, actually, they are not only trying to kill the truth, but also they are shooting themselves in the foot, because in a situation like the one we're living now, we need people to be able to know exactly what is going on if they are going to abide by the instructions that the governments are putting out for their health safety. So it's really counterproductive to try and curtail freedom of journalists, particularly in this situation of crisis, because unless people are absolutely confident that the information they are getting is right and is objective, they're not going to be able to abide by the instructions that are given. And not only that, when you curtail the truth, then you give more platform, more oxygen to false information, to fake news. And what fake news does, of course, it confuses people, and also it gives the opportunity to those who want to exploit this situation to be able to advance their own agenda. In that case, you're not protecting the people. You, of course, you can blame the media all you like, but the fault is on the government. The responsibility is on the government to ensure that information that is being put out is objective, is independent, and in return, it can generate trust from the public.
Okay, and the government should encourage this. The government should ensure that journalists can do their work, because fake news, by ensuring that journalists can do their job, it would curb fake news.
It will, because and we don't mind if people want to put out what they regard as information, because as long as journalists are able to give facts, to give the context, then more people will be able to see for themselves what is true and what is not. And in the long term, that what is fake news, what is not actually truthful, will just die by its own death. But when we see governments like in Hungary, like in Turkey, trying to increase surveillance of journalists, trying to limit the freedom of journalists, what they do, they of course give oxygen to fake news. And that's not what we need in this particular crisis.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, I would have a question that's really linked with that you were discussing. It's about fake news. And actually, I'm sure that you as a journalist, you know very well how to detect when you are facing a fake news. So could you maybe explain to our viewers how you can exactly detect if a source of what you are reading is fake and not reliable? I mean, what are the indicators to detect that?
Yes, and that's again a very good question, because it allows me to explain what we mean by journalists are not experts in everything. Okay, we are not experts in health, for instance. So when the only way we can convince you that the information we are giving you is accurate to the best of our knowledge is what we use. We use facts. We can go to visit a hospital. We can talk to patients. We can talk to doctors and other medical professionals, and we put facts in their own context. We give our sources. You can verify our sources. You can verify the accuracy of these sources, even the expertise. And then taken together, everybody can make up their own mind, say, yeah, I think that is convincing, or maybe there's something still missing. That is exactly the opposite of what fake news does. What fake news does, they don't tell you who their sources are or what expertise they have. They don't even give you any facts. They simply give you an opinion. Now, you and I can have an opinion on one thing, but we have the right to have an opinion. But what we do not have is the right to have our own facts, because the facts are something that everybody can verify for themselves. You can see the pictures, you can tell the timing, you can tell the place, the location. You are able to actually make your final decision about the objectivity of that information. So fake news is actually easy to debunk, really. If you're given the facts, if you're given the proper context, if you know who is talking about this subject, if you know where they're coming from, their background, you can actually make up your own mind and say, this news, this fake news.
Okay, thank you. Shema, would you like to continue, or yeah?
I don't want to just grotesque the questions, but I'll just jump into another section of the current issues that we are how to say facing.
Yeah.
The restrictions of the freedom of expression or freedom of the journalist. So, as my colleague Eva said, that it didn't just come out today. We had this problem before, but maybe problem is that because of the COVID-19, it just came under light more than before. So we are now receiving before it was it was just a case of the human rights, freedom of expression, but now we are struggling because of the freedom of journalist restriction. So because of this abandonment, we are now receiving more vital problems. So do you think that COVID-19 will change something? I mean, will grow up some new debates about vitality of the freedom of expression, freedom of journalists, or maybe we will continue with the worst cases, like government would take advantage of the crisis of the fake news?
Well, actually, one of the things that will come out from this crisis is that on the whole, of course, we talk about governments, some governments we are trying to take advantage and give themselves widespread powers. But on the whole, in this crisis, most governments have tried to allow journalists to go about their business. There have been, of course, restrictions in some countries, but on the whole, we have been very pleased to see that these restrictions, as far as journalists were concerned, have been limited. They were able to move around, they were able to go to near hospitals, to talk to patients, to go and see some care homes, see what the situation there. And really I take personally courage in this particular development. But what you say is right. You're very right. I mean, fake news is not new. What is new is that there are now more platforms where it can spread. It goes to social media, go to YouTube. Anyone can put anything out, and in an instant, it goes viral. And so that's new. In the past, it would take longer to spread across, and that's no longer the case. But what also people will insist on out of this crisis is that they must be told the truth, because unlike maybe an armed conflict, where yes, of course, if you happen to be in an area where there is fighting going on, if you're not in the vicinity, you're not very concerned. But this one concerns everybody. This one can kill anyone, anywhere, anytime. And people are going to say, I have people that are said to be at risk, elderly people. Everybody has got elderly people in their families, and we need to protect them. We want to protect them. So people are not going to simply accept any government's behavior which puts people at risk. And I think going forward, they will see that media be able to work independently and in a free manner, so that they can be informed about what may put their lives at risk. And that, to me, will be a big achievement if indeed that happens.
Can I continue with a question about the overall topic that we mentioned today? And so I have two questions about that. First, according to you, how important is for a journalist to be self-compliant, especially in a situation of crisis? Mm-hmm. And second one is overall, for you as a journalist, where does the right middle between freedom of expression and self-compliance stands? And how do you feel about this? There is in Russia, usually you use the term of self-censorship. Mm-hmm. What's your feeling about that?
Well, journalism is actually different from what you call press freedom, is different from freedom of expression. These are two different concepts. Of course, press freedom is an ancillary, as we say, or a derivative from the freedom of expression. But what you call self-containment, I think that's what you call it?
No, self-compliance, like
self-compliant.
Yeah, like the idea of being aware of what you are saying can have some consequences, some impact, and that you should be very careful of what you are saying. Absolutely. So in a way, you can self-censor yourself, because you know that something that you are going to say, it's going to affect people.
That's right.
So
that's what we call ethics in journalism. Now, mm-hmm. I'll give you, there are many rules in journalism, but there are three golden rules, I would say. One is to be absolutely sure that you're telling the truth as far as you can establish the truth to be. Secondly, you have to be independent. That means you have to present all sides to the story that you're covering. And thirdly, you have to be responsible. Now, being responsible, in other words, is to avoid causing any harm. Now, how do you do that? If you're reporting on something, your obligation as a journalist is to tell the truth, to be independent, to give facts as you found them to be. And therefore, you cannot withdraw what you consider to be an important fact. Because if you withdraw an important fact from a story, then you limit the ability of your audience to get the truth. You see what I mean? But as opposite to that, what is important is what justifies or allows people to make up their mind about the situation you're reporting, you're talking about. For instance, it's not important to go out and promote violence. Of course, we have no role in promoting violence or discrimination or hatred, because these are not factors which are going to help anyone understand anything. Because hatred or discrimination, as you know, are simply, number one, they are illegal. it's against the law. Number two, they create divisions instead of, they divide people instead of bringing people together. And let me take this opportunity and tell you that we as journalists, we're not about preaching peace. We are not pastors. We are not religious leaders. But our responsibility is to respect everybody and respect every right of every individual. Therefore, that's why we can't promote violence, discrimination, or hatred. Or even private lives. Why do you need to go into somebody's privacy when you are a professional journalist? That's not your role. Your role is to look at what is the public interest. So when you pursue the public interest, then you have to abide by the important factors to establish that interest. Therefore, self-censorship is not really advisable because it limits the ability of people to understand, to comprehend the totality of the challenges that they may be facing. But at the same time, what is public interest, you have then to balance it off with what is private, because what is private is no use to anyone else who maybe is beyond your family. So that's why, as journalists, we're looking at public interest. That's really, if you like, the guiding principle, and that's what we need to work towards, and leave aside anything else which is illegal, like promoting hatred, promoting violence, promoting discrimination, or indeed invading privacy of people.
Okay, thank you. So you'd say like this kind of limit stands between public interest and like personal issues or personal life of someone that are not under the scope of journalism.
No, I know. I mean, naturally, if you know somebody and you can, if I give you the example of investigative journalism, if somebody is committing a crime and you are able to detect what they're about, that is no longer private, because number one, that is a crime, and number two, in being a crime, that means it concerns the public interest, because of course a crime will impact the whole community. But otherwise, anything which is not criminal, anything which is not fraudulent, which is simply private, that's not for journalists. That's for maybe religious leaders who can speak about morality, can speak about the way we should live according to whichever religion your faith. That is different. That is not a public interest. That is a private matter, best to be left for individual to decide how to go about it.
To manage.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have another question that's not linked to the previous one, but it's really linked to this day of oral press freedom and to the concept of solidarity, I would say. Mm-hmm. In different parts of the world, there are thousands of journalists in jail that did nothing but doing their job, actually. And we see that states have different strategies, ways of imprisoning them. Either, for example, in Turkey, under Erdogan regime, they call them terrorists, which is the easiest way to get rid of someone. In Putin's regime, for example, in Russia, you call them drug dealers, as for example, the Ivan Golunov, I don't know if you heard of, but it was a case of big visibility of an investigative journalist who was arrested on drug charges and then was released because it turned out that it was just a way to get rid of him, because he was investigating some high corruption cases, and due actually to the solidarity of his colleague in journalism, he was released, because public opinion journalists started to really criticize what is happening, and actually because of that he was released. So my question to you would be, these days, what is your way of showing solidarity with your imprisoned fellow colleagues, for example? Do you have any, I don't know, initiatives that you take, maybe not specifically you, but your colleagues, and to show solidarity to other colleagues that are in jail or unfairly treated, I would say?
Okay. Well, funny you should raise that question because as we speak, we are launching a global campaign. The IFJ is launching a global campaign together with other organizations to appeal to all governments where journalists are in jail to release them. That's something we're doing particularly now because of this crisis, because clearly we know that those people who are at most risk during this crisis of COVID-19 are those who are in jail. I mean, at least those who are in jail are among people who are at high risk. So we are appealing to government to release detained journalists because this is a very, very serious situation. But everything across the year, throughout the year, we actually campaign for the release of our colleagues who are in jail throughout the world. We know that these people, as you say, are in jail not because they committed any crime, but simply because somebody powerful enough took objection to offense to what they published. And therefore, they are actually prisoners, yes, of conscience, because they have a professional conscience. They did their job for the benefit of the public, of the society, and now they are being punished. They are being subjected to reprisals. So we are appealing to governments to release them, particularly now, because we know they suffer being in prison, but we now know they even suffer more because they may indeed contract the virus and they can lose their lives. And therefore, this is a particular campaign. This is a focused campaign, which I would call a humanitarian campaign. But throughout the year, we do campaign everywhere in the world where we know that a journalist is in jail. We always campaign to the UN in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Council, to the other regional organizations like the European Union. You talked about Russia. We have actually a member in Russia, and with them we are all trying to plead and to do advocacy for our colleagues in Russia, in Turkey, in Azerbaijan, everywhere that we know journalists are in jail. We do that. But this particular campaign is really for humanitarian reasons. These people are in danger of losing their lives to this virus. And therefore, we are saying to the governments who are detaining them to please release them because of this particular situation.
Oh, I see. So do you see that like solidarity among journalists, as in other cases, let's say, bear its fruits? I mean, because we saw this case I was mentioning, that it was really because of the influence of the press that he was released.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could gain his freedom. So do you really believe in a solidarity among fellow journalists and really have an impact?
Oh yes, we do, and we have seen not only in recent times, but also even going back in years gone by, we saw that solidarity can actually bring results. We see it in Colombia, we've seen it in Iran even, we've seen it in Turkey, because in Turkey, for instance, like in Russia, we simply don't appeal to governments, because we know sometimes governments, they know that they have no reason to detain journalists, but they do so because of their political agenda. But so what we do together again, we petition tribunals and courts, for instance, the European Court of Human Rights. We submit what we call amicus curiae submissions. That means the friends of the court, even if we are not the ones in jail, but we can intervene on their behalf or together with their families. And we have seen also results from that. So solidarity is actually key, because, you know, if you look at our situation as journalists, when you stand alone, you stand no chance against a government or even against a powerful individual. You simply stand no chance. But working together with your colleagues, and even beyond journalism, because we know, like you're doing now, I mean, you actually taking part and supporting our campaign, and you're right to do so, because in the end, as I said, we journalists, we serve the public interest, we serve our communities, and it is only right that the communities can then come back and also support their press. Somebody said actually that if people want to be free, they need to free their press first. And I believe in that. I do believe in that. And therefore, working together among ourselves as journalists, but also with other like-minded organizations, we can actually bring about change in the way that journalists are being treated, and actually, therefore, bring benefit to the whole communities, which are going to be more informed, better informed, and which are they going to be able to make informed decisions for their lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ernest?
Yes?
Can I ask you when this campaign is going to start so that we can spread the word, so to speak?
Well, I just before we start this conversation, I was exchanging with my colleagues, because as you know now we working, each one is working from home, so we are trying to we are for now making a list, for instance, of countries where we know that journalists are being detained. So we are going to be launching it. I'm hoping, if not Monday, then next week, early next week. But we have also been taking part in other campaign, because again, we're not the only ones doing it. I personally took part in a campaign for the release of journalists in Turkey. This was launched at the beginning of April. So we took part in it. We did videos and messages, and it was all over the social media. So we are now going to launch a campaign to coincide, of course, with the 3rd of May. So it will be out very, very, very shortly. And of course, it will be my pleasure to update you when it starts so that you can take part.
That sounds really good. Thank you. Can I please go back to a point that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
You spoke about the importance of facts, and considering your professional position, I was wondering what you think about Daniel Patrick Moynihan's quote, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not his own facts.
Yes.
And how could you link it to self-compliance in these times of COVID-19, but also the subjectivity of an individual being a journalist and having to be objective?
That's right. That's a very good question, because we say that as journalists, when we are doing our job, we do not have a personal opinion. That's not what people are interested in. Because if you're covering a health crisis like today, journalists are not, as I said, they are not experts in that domain, but we know experts in that domain. So it's not about us. It's not about what we believe. It's what experts believe. It's what patients are saying to us. That's what is important. These are facts. Somebody is ill and someone is saying, now you may have a difference of opinion among experts, and that's very good. What we do, we simply make sure that you as our listeners and audience get to hear what all these experts are saying. And at the end of the day, it's up to you to make up your mind. And luckily enough, we do have official health officials. It's their job to formulate policy, it's their job to come up with recommendations, and we are simply acting as a vehicle to communicate those recommendations and the policies. It's not our policies, we don't make up policies. So what is good about journalism is we're not trying to say these are facts. We're not determining what is a fact or not. We are simply giving you facts as we find them, and then we put them in their context, because it's also very important. Facts are very important, but the context is also very important. To give you an example, for people to understand it, I may tell you that somebody has died somewhere. That's a fact. But if I'm going to say that person died of COVID-19, I need to put that in the context. Health officials have determined that the case, or the person was admitted because of that. So that's the context. So I give you the fact and I give you the context. And so for us, it's actually easy, because we say that journalism is not in looking, is outward looking. So I'm going around meeting people, meeting experts, and coming together, bringing together their views and saying, hey, you know what? Here's what I found out. What do you think about this? And therefore, it's not my opinion. It's an opinion of someone else. And it's, if I put that opinion into its own context, and I'm helping you to make a decision about yourself.
So you would say that a journalist's job is to bring the facts to the public and to ensure that you stay objective?
Exactly.
So your it's even, you would say that subjectivity is even hard to implement in the job of a journalist?
Well, we try not to be subjective. We really need not to be subjective. Again, we're talking about human beings, of course. Things may happen, but everybody, if you go to any school of journalism, they will teach you, for instance, journalism is different from communications. I always have this discussion about my friends who are in communications. I have been in communications myself. I was a spokesperson for the International Criminal Court. My job was to try and put our best foot forward, not to make sure that we get a good image, we got a good coverage, and that's my job, okay? But journalism is not about that. We're not serving anyone apart from the entire public, where I can put to you an opinion of somebody and an opinion of someone who says the very opposite. But because that's my job, I need to bring you, when I talked about independence and impartiality, that's what I meant. There may be more than one opinion about something. My job is to find out what are all the opinions possible about that particular subject, and make sure that you, as the listener or the audience, get to know all about these opinions, and then you can make up your own mind. That's all. So at the very best of our ability, we have to be objective. Try to be as least subjective as possible.
How do you keep yourself in check, though, as a journalist?
Well, actually, it's not very difficult. When you accept that your job is not to be a spokesperson for one side or the other, your job is simply to try and find the facts. Now, that's what is actually harder, because finding facts is not easy, because one, as you know, some people may not be willing to give you the facts for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Number two, not least actually, you may need to understand those facts. If you're dealing with a very specialized subject like COVID-19, you got to understand all these terms, all these medical terms. You need to be able to break them into a language which is accessible to everybody, not just professionals. That is really hard. But once you have done that, once you have done your homework, then it becomes easy. You say to people, you know what? Here's what is happening. Here's what people who are really knowledgeable about it are saying, and this is the context. And then that's up to you. That's basically, we say journalism is informing. The better term actually is educating. You educate people about something which is happening and which is in public interest.
Yes, and a journalist needs to, part of a journalist's job then should also be, if I understand well, to be informed yourself.
Oh, yes.
So much so that you could educate people, because I think when it comes to COVID-19, doctors are discovering new things every single hour, and yeah. I think for a journalist, it can be quite hard to be on top of those new developments.
Yeah.
Is that really a challenge? I think it's a challenge to really always understand, let's say, the scientific fact and then present it objectively and coherently to the
audiences. Well,
yes.
That's why you need to talk to the experts. You need to really go and meet with them, sit with them, and let them educate you. You're right, Eva. You have to educate yourself before you can educate anyone else. And that's what I say. It is the hardest thing to do, because you need to really come to the understanding of what you're going to talk about. And then once you have understood it, and then your next job is, how do I make sure that people who I'm going to report this to, I'm going to be able to comprehend it themselves. And that's why the language is important. I can tell you that when I was the spokesperson, I'll have to write up a press release about a topic of international law, which is really dense, which is really complicated. And even though I am a lawyer by training, so I can understand it myself, but my mother is not a lawyer. My mother is not a law graduate. How do I make sure that she understands it? How do I make sure that young people who are not law graduates will understand it? So I need to choose the language which is accessible to them. And you'll find that when you understand something, really understand it well, then the language to express it becomes also easier for you. There's a saying in French, I don't know if any of you speaks French, but there's a saying in French which says that what you understand really well, when you understand something really well, then the language to express it comes to you naturally. And that's so true.
How does it sound in French? Because
it says that, alors, comment on dit, alors, on dit ce qu'on comprend aisément, si on comprend quelque chose aisément, le langage pour exprimer vient naturellement.
D'accord.
Thank you so much, Ernest. What I would like to just briefly express what I understood today of your speech. Freedom of press is essential because there's a correlation between freedom of press and social cohesion and government, trust to government. That's why in order to have a social cohesion and stability of the government, we need to define the press freedom as vital thing in our society. Am I right? Did I understand well?
Yes, you're right. I mean, we cannot overemphasize the importance of having a press which is independent, which is free from any pressure. And I don't mean only political pressure. It could be also economic pressure. Yep. It could be ideological pressure. It's really important for our societies. If you're going to make stable societies, progressive societies, we need people to be able, remember what I say about the public and inclusive debate. If you look at any society, you will see that those societies where there is tolerance to the other opinion, you can allow someone to express an opinion which may be different from yours, but which has also its importance. If you respect somebody's right, even if you don't share their way of life, if you don't share their faith, if you just allow people to be able to share, people who share our country, and I can actually go far and say people who share the planet as we have it now, if we understand each other, then we can resolve many issues which lead to conflict, or which lead to crises like the one we have now. And for all of us to be able to arrive at that level, we need a platform where we can discuss those issues. And the only platform we have is the press. So it's a very important tool. We say in my organization, we say that journalism is a public good. You know, these two words are really important. It's a good and it is a public good. It's not good for just me and you. It's good for everybody. But if it's going to be good for everybody, then everybody we must have a stake in it. You must not be excluded, because if you're excluded, then it's no longer good for you. In fact, it's not even public. And that's why we are saying that the entire community, and we're very glad that through UNESCO, we now have this World Press Freedom Day, where we come together as journalists and governments and civil society all together to discuss how can we make journalism really become that public good.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask a recommendation about for our audience, or maybe prospective journalists or young people, in order to be fluent in case of the critical thinking. Okay, what would you like to recommend us as a book, like 3 books that you would like to recommend us as essential to be read?
Okay, That's an easy one. There is a very good book which is The First Casualty is Truth. That's a good book for anyone who wants to understand journalism. And the other book I would recommend is a book written by a friend of mine, Jean-Paul Martos, which is about war correspondence, because war, as I say, is a very challenging subject to cover, but also important because not only because of people lose lives in war, of course, but more importantly because these wars, they depend on the public support. You cannot wage a military campaign if you don't have support from maybe sectors of your community. So very important for people to read about that book. And the other book I would like to recommend, can I recommend a book by a certain Barack Obama, The Urgency of Hope? Because I think people need hope in their lives.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you. It was very fast. Okay, but would you like to give us 3 movies?
Oh, 3 movies. Now, I've got many movies in my mind, but there is a movie which is maybe sad for some people, but I think it's important. The Longest Day, which is about the landing in France in 1944. I visited Normandy with my kids, and we visited the cemeteries of allies in France, and it brings, I think, into sharp contrast and sharp focus the sacrifice that these young men really paid for freedom again. Again, we come back to freedom. And that's a very good movie I like. And the other movie, which was, it's a movie that I watched in 1994, Schindler's List.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I come from Rwanda originally, and actually I went to watch the movie on the advice of a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine from Afghanistan, who was at university with me in London. And it was during the time of the Rwandan genocide, the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, in which I lost many family members. But it's again a movie which I think displays the cruelty of human cruelty among humans. And finally, I need to find a good movie which is positive. There is a very good movie I watched. It's a French movie. The title is Qu'avons-nous fait au bon Dieu? What have we done to God? It's a French comedy, French comedy, but really, really good. It's about a family of a couple of 4 daughters who all married different people from different backgrounds, including African, Chinese, Arab, and Jewish background. Fascinating movie. If you can watch it, I think you'll find it really hilarious.
Okay. So I would like to ask you the 3 essential principles of good journalists.
Oh, right. That's an easy one. As I said, 3 golden rules: accuracy, impartiality, and responsibility.
The last word would you like to say?
Well, really, my last word would be to thank you. Really, thank you for. No, I mean it, because it can be very easy for journalists to talk among themselves, but it has come to the point where we cannot make a difference if we simply continue talking to ourselves. So when I see organizations like yours trying to take interest, trying to know what is going on in journalism, I take really courage, I take heart. So I would like to thank you for joining us, and also an appeal to you, because we are not perfect. So as much as we need your support, we also need your feedback, whether positive or negative, about journalism, because in the end, we serve the public and we need to hear from them. So hear from them is through you, through other organizations like yours, So these will be my two last words, to thank you and to ask for your feedback.
Thank you. I think like maybe just in a small case, but I think journalism can be described as art of asking question. I hope you like the question that we have asked to you, and thank you very much for your joining in our program, and it was very pleasured. And
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it, and I do mean it when I say thank you, because it's through you that we can reach the wider civil society, and then we can take the public with us in this journey, which without them, journalism should have no role. So thank you again, and very good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.